Ever think about how just like tiny changes could make a huge difference in your life?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's what we're going to be diving into today with James Clear's Atomic Habits.
Okay, cool.
So, we're going to uncover how these small changes can create a ripple effect
Right.
and then ultimately lead to those remarkable results. It's not about some overnight transformation. It
Yeah.
really is about consistency and understanding that power of compounding those tiny gains.
And it's interesting. Clear's own story is a real testament to that. He didn't just wake up one day and had mastered this whole thing.
Hmm.
He actually went through this life-altering experience.
Oh, really?
Yeah, brutal baseball accident,
Yeah.
left him with, significant injuries, a
Right.
broken nose,
No.
facial fractures, even double vision.
Geez, that's
It
intense.
was a lot. I mean, it really makes you realize how those seemingly small wins, those are the building blocks, right?
Yeah, it's the
And
overhead.
Clear Story really just throws light on this whole idea of tiny gains.
Yeah.
This concept that consistent, incremental improvements can lead to incredible long-term results.
It's so true. Think about it this way. Imagine a pilot, right? And they're just slightly adjusting the plane's course,
Okay.
just a couple of degrees. Now, to us passengers, we don't even notice,
Right.
right? It's barely noticeable. But think about it. Over a long flight,
Yeah.
that small adjustment
Right.
could be the difference between landing in Paris
Right.
or Poland, right?
That's a big difference.
Huge difference. Your life is kind of like that flight. What feels like a small, insignificant change today, what could that lead to a year from now? That completely changes how I view my habits. It's not just about discipline.
Yeah.
It's about strategically designing these changes.
Yeah.
So, okay, so how do we do that? How do we crack the code of these habits and actually make them work for us?
Well, Clear breaks down habits into a simple yet powerful framework. He calls it the four-step loop.
Okay.
Cue, craving response, and reward. And this is something we experience every single day, probably.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so let's unpack this loop. So, what does each stage really mean in terms of building those lasting habits?
Okay, so let's use an example of our ancestors.
Okay.
Picture them, they're foraging for food, right? And they spot a tree
Okay.
laden with ripe fruit.
Yeah.
That's the cue. It's a signal,
Oh,
a trigger that a potential reward delicious food is within reach.
got it. So the craving is that desire for the fruit, right? That anticipation of satisfaction.
Exactly.
And the response would be the action they take. So actually climbing that tree to get that reward.
Exactly. And finally, the reward, the sweet taste of the fruit,
Yeah.
that satisfying feeling of fulfilling that initial craving. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Each part of this loop
Okay.
is crucial. If there's no cue, you're less likely to even think about the habit.
Right.
If the craving isn't strong enough, where's the motivation?
Right. Yeah.
And if the response, the action itself, is too difficult,
Yeah.
we're less likely to do it.
Totally. It makes perfect sense. And even if we power through, if there's no rewarding feeling at the end, why bother repeating it, right?
Exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. Understanding this loop is key because it allows us to strategically design our habits for success. It's less about willpower
I like that.
and more about working with these natural tendencies we all have.
Yeah.
And a huge part of that is recognizing the impact our environment has on our habits.
That's huge.
We don't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
Our surroundings play a huge role in shaping our behaviors.
Totally. It's like that saying, out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
But the opposite is true, too. If temptation is constantly right there in front of us,
Yeah.
it's so hard to resist.
Absolutely. Clear talks about making good habits obvious and bad habits invisible.
Okay.
And a great example he gives is this technique that Japanese railway workers use called the point and call system.
Okay.
And it's so simple.
I've heard of this.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
They literally point at and call out
It seems so simple.
each signal and action.
Yeah. Almost too simple.
Right.
But it drastically reduces errors. Why is that?
Because it forces awareness,
Oh.
mindfulness.
Ah.
When you have to consciously acknowledge each step, it's much harder to just slip up or make a mistake out of habit.
Right.
And the great thing is we can apply this to our own lives. Claire's suggests this thing called the Habits Scorecard.
Okay, the habit scorecard. Tell me more about this. How does it work?
So basically, it's like taking inventory of your daily habits.
Okay.
You list out all your regular habits, and you mark them as either good, bad, or neutral. I actually tried this myself.
Really?
And I was shocked
What'd you find?
how many mindless habits I had.
Really?
It's really eye-opening.
Yeah, it's like shining a light on those autopilot behaviors.
Yeah.
But, even when we can identify those bad habits and we know what we should be doing,
Right.
there's still that hurdle of sticking with it, like
Yeah.
actually sticking with the good habits.
Totally. And that's where the power of making good habits satisfying comes in.
Okay.
Our brains are wired to prioritize immediate gratification. We want that reward now, not later, even if it's a smaller reward.
So how do we bridge that gap? How do we make those good habits feel good right now in the present moment?
So there are a few strategies that we can use. One is to find ways to make the good habit itself more enjoyable.
Okay.
Clear talks about this study in Pakistan where researchers, they provided a neighborhood with this premium soap.
Okay.
And it was the kind of soap that smells amazing.
Yeah.
And it feels really luxurious on your skin. And guess what? Hand washing increased dramatically.
Really? Just from enjoying the experience more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And not only that, but illnesses in the community decreased significantly.
Oh, wow.
And what's even more fascinating, they followed up years later.
Oh, wow.
And most households had stuck with the habit, even without the free soap.
That's incredible.
It's powerful.
It shows how strong it can be to link those positive feelings
Yeah.
to a habit and make it something we look forward to
Exactly.
instead of dreading.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
Another strategy is what Clear calls temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling. What is that?
Okay, so it's basically linking something that you want to do with something that you need to do.
Okay, give me an example.
Okay, let's say you love listening to podcasts.
I do, yeah.
But you struggle to motivate yourself to exercise.
Yeah, I'm there with you.
So temptation bundling would be only allowing yourself to listen to your favorite podcasts while you're exercising.
Oh, that's good.
That way you get the immediate reward of enjoying the podcast, which helps you power through the workout.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Win-win.
A win-win. You're making that necessary habit more enjoyable,
Right.
but you're also making sure you're indulging in the thing you really want to do while also doing something that's beneficial for you.
Exactly.
I like that. You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of something else that Clear talks about in the book, the connection between our habits and our identity.
Yes. It's a fascinating concept.
Right.
Our habits are often a reflection of our identity and vice versa.
Okay.
What we do consistently says a lot about who we believe we are.
So if I hit the snooze button every morning, does that mean I'm inherently lazy?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It might mean that you value sleep over punctuality in the morning.
Okay.
Or maybe you haven't found a way to make waking up enjoyable.
Okay.
The point is, once we believe something about ourselves,
Right.
we tend to act in ways that reinforce that belief.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's both empowering and also kind of daunting
Right.
to think that we're not just stuck with our current habits.
Right.
We can actually change who we are by changing what we do.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
You get to decide who you want to be and then act in accordance with that vision.
Yeah.
So instead of saying like, oh, I'm trying to be healthier,
Right.
you start saying, I am a healthy person.
I am a healthy person. And each time you make a choice that aligns with that,
Yeah.
it reinforces that.
It's like a vote
Yeah, exactly. It's like casting a
for
vote
the type of person you want to be.
for who you're becoming. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And that actually reminds me, that ties back to something you were talking about earlier about showing up consistently even when you don't feel like it.
Absolutely.
Clear talks about that as being like a defining characteristic of those successful people.
Yeah, they just find a
They
way
just make it happen.
to make it happen, regardless of their motivation levels.
It reminds me of that quote, amateurs practice until they get it right, professionals practice until they can't get it wrong.
I love that.
Right.
It's about mastering that art of showing up,
Yeah.
even when it's inconvenient,
Yeah.
or you'd rather be doing anything else.
Exactly.
And it's not that they have this like never-ending well of willpower.
Right.
It's that they've cultivated this discipline
Mm-hmm.
to stick to those commitments, even when it's hard.
They've built those muscles
Exactly.
of like resilience. And yeah, like you said, it becomes less about the motivation and more about acting in alignment with that identity.
Exactly. If you identify as someone who is committed to their goals, showing up isn't a chore.
Yeah.
It's just who you are.
It's just part of who you are. Yeah.
Yeah.
So much of it seems like it just comes down to perspective.
Totally.
Like shifting your perspective, it's not about the individual actions,
It's the mindset.
but it's the overall big picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's honestly one of the biggest takeaways from Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
It's not a quick fix. It's a framework for understanding how habits work and then using that knowledge to create lasting change.
It's those small, like, atomic changes, but they compound over time
They really do.
and lead to a pretty remarkable life.
I agree.
As we're wrapping up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Yeah.
Clear talks about how successful people find a way to show up even when they don't feel like it.
Yes.
So I'm asking you, what is one small habit, just one, that you can commit to doing every single day?
Yeah.
Even when it's tough.
Even when you don't want to...
Even when you're tired. Even when you'd rather do anything else.
Yeah, it'd be anything.
Yeah.
5 minutes of exercise.
Yeah.
Reading a few pages of a book.
Right.
Meditating.
Whatever.
Anything.
It could be anything.
That aligns with the person you want to be.
Exactly.
One thing, and commit to it.
Because those seemingly insignificant actions, when you do them consistently, it's incredible what they can lead to.
They can have a monumental impact, yeah.
Yeah, this deep dive was just a glimpse into this world of atomic habits, and we highly encourage you to check out his book. Who knows, it might just change your life, one good habit at a time.
I think it will.